Hi, everyone. Janelle here, your relationship coach. I am with my very good friend, Jude Sandval. He's the founder of Divorced Dads Advocate. And I just thought it would be awesome to have him here to just let's talk about divorce. So let's start with Jude. Tell us about yourself. How did you become, the founder of this company, and what was really your mission in creating this community?
Hey, Janelle, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I never thought that, firstly, I never thought that I would ever be divorced because my parents were divorced, and that was not something that was ever going to be an option for me when I got married.
Mhm.
And well, lo and behold, don't ever tell God something that's not going to happen because plans often change. And I was married for 11 years and had what I would describe and what I had envisioned as a great life, and a couple of kids and the house and the business, and the marriage was okay. Wasn't great, but it was adequate. And so I was pretty happy, but that all came crumbling down after 11 years. And I went through a very high conflict divorce.
Mm.
And the subsequent 9.5 years since have been very tumultuous and argumentative. And we've been in and out of court for most of that time and have spent multiple six figures in this entire process, which is absolute insanity. And
Wow.
what I finally came to after going through all of this and a couple of years ago was that there are some resources out there for divorced or divorcing dads specifically, but there's just not a ton, and there's definitely not a one place for them to stop and find that. And so
Mm.
being the father of three daughters who were 6, 4, and 2 when we started the process, and who are now 16, 14, and 12, I've
Wow.
kind of seen the whole thing from beginning to end and wanted to provide a resource for dads where they can come and be in a community that's going to help them, whether they're contemplating going through or post divorce.
Yeah. So what was that like for you? It sounded like this was a very painful time in your life and you were looking for support, and it sounded like it was not easy to get the support that you were looking for.
Well,
Like,
I don't know about you, but I've never talked to anybody that said was awesome. My divorce was awesome. It was so easy and no problem. And I had no emotions around it. And the breakup's been great since, and co-parenting is perfect. And so, yeah, I never hear that. I don't know about you. And if
yeah.
anybody listening has, please email me because I want to do a case study on
Well, I mean,
it.
we're talking about our own divorces. Mine actually was like that. However, I have to say, so we were together. I think it wasn't a long marriage, first of all. I think we
Okay.
were together for about 5 years and married for about almost three.
Okay.
But you know what? I almost knew like the day we got back from our honeymoon. I'm this like the warning bells already started to go. And so really for me, what didn't work was that I had certain expectations,
Mm,
and I was very clear about what those expectations were. My parents had a really great marriage, and so that's what I envisioned for myself, right? These
right.
parents who, they had a business together, they went to church together, they did everything. Everything was about family. It was beautiful, and that's what I wanted. And so, those were the promises that were made, and it was like almost as though we came home from our honeymoon, and he was like, "I'm done."
Mm,
And he just stopped putting any effort, stopped going to church. He started spending more and more time in the garage he loved to build things, which was great. But hello, your new wife is at home waiting for
yeah.
you to come into the house.
Let's build our relationship.
But yeah, he
Right.
just loved to do that stuff. And I just felt very duped,
Okay.
like the misrepresented. And so I was very angry. But luckily, we didn't have kids.
Right.
And because we were so early in our relationship, we didn't have any property.
Yeah.
But I remember we were actually at our wedding. It's my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my mom. My dad's passed away. And we're all sitting around the table at our wedding. And my mom looks over at us playfully and she says, "So, when are the kids coming?"
Yeah.
And my in-laws, who are millionaires, but like the cheapest millionaires you will ever meet, were like, "You guys can't have a kid." I'm like, "Well, why not?" "Well, you guys have debt and you don't own a house."
Oh my.
So all of a sudden we went from, yeah, let's have kids to now, oh no, we have to have this, this, and this before we have those kids.
Right.
So again, the plan got changed and I had no say in it. So anyway, at the end of the day, I got to a point where I was just so angry. I found out about this course about, your mind and transforming your life. And I thought, okay, I'm going to bring him with me and I'm going to fix him. I'm going to fix him.
Of course you were.
And I get in the course and he's like not present whatsoever. He's like sleeping during this course. But, I just started to realize like, wow, I have been not taking responsibility for this relationship. I've been making him wrong. I have been not very nice about it. And that was the moment where I just had a chance to just look at him and just say, you know what? I am so sorry for the way I've been judging you and treating you. And you're great the way you are. And it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to get divorced. I'd like to complete this relationship. And what was so amazing, the breakthrough in this, Jude, is that we actually went to the divorce courts together. We signed the papers together. I think our divorce in total cost us $80.
Wow.
Because we didn't need lawyers or, any of that stuff. We went out for dinner. I gave him a kiss on the cheek. And I said, "Good luck." And I got out of the car and that was pretty much it.
Right.
Now,
Well, it's interesting. So I find something interesting that you said there because we started this with, I don't think anybody goes through divorce and says, "Oh, that was great," because you said I was angry and expectations and like all of that stuff is, I would venture to say, and I venture to say this based upon the work that I do with the dads, is that the mental emotional part of it is the most difficult, challenging, painful part of it. And so like going through the process and divorce and all that, there's all of those challenges, but where your head's at and getting through that, I don't think anybody, so you just actually validated what I said, which was, yeah, it's challenging. I don't know that anybody says, "Oh, well, it was no problem. We just figured out we're good and we just are done." Like you go through this process of having to, it's a revelation, right? It's an unfolding of yourself and learning, if you've done the work. Like obviously you've done the work, so you can look back and say, yeah, well, it was this, or it was expectations, and then it was this part, and we talked about things, but we hadn't talked about what our beliefs were, or what our intentions were, or how we're going to go about those, and whether we're going to have kids first or we're going to wait and get the, like all of these different things. You've done the work to look back and understand what that is, which is huge, because if we want another healthy relationship, which I think all of us do, none of us get into a divorce or into a marriage in order to get divorced, but if we want to have another one, we've got to do that work and pay attention to what it is that we brought to the unhealthy what part we brought to the unhealthy dynamic, which I loved what you said, which is, "I'm sorry, I didn't do this right," because that is one of the only things, is pretty much the only thing that we can control through this whole process is our emotions and how we show up in our behaviors through the process, because we don't know how somebody else. And so maybe that's a good message for men or women listening, because you and I were just talking about the different way that men and women go through the breakups and divorce or whatever. But if you focus on yourself, that's going to make things a lot easier, because if you start thinking about the other person, trying to fix the other person, try to control the situation, perpetuate the unhealthy dynamic that's going on, it's just going to be a complete, let's not say complete, but it's going to make things much more challenging.
I have a saying, and it's one of the sayings that I live by myself. And also when I coach my couples, I say, and it goes like this: pain and suffering only exists when we resist what is so. And so I had to kind of just stop and go, there was a moment in this course that I realized that there was this pattern that I had with all of my relationships. And in
Mhm.
this course, we were really like encouraged to go back to when was the first time we felt this way? You know, if we're dealing with unworthiness, we're dealing with trust issues, we're dealing with abandonment issues, you know, we were invited to really look at, well, is it the person that you're dealing with right in front of you that is perpetuating or triggering that? Or is it coming from something else from your childhood that you actually haven't resolved? And what I realized, like, oh yeah, I totally have this thing that, you know, I've been bullied, there's been abuse, there's been, you know, some pretty nasty stuff that's happened in my childhood that I haven't really dealt with. And so guess what? In as an adult, I was attracting people in my life that I already kind of maybe subconsciously knew that they were not going to treat me well.
Mm,
Because it's
yeah.
no coincidence that none of my boyfriends were liked by my parents. Right?
Right.
They
Yeah.
didn't like any of them. So it's like, why? Now I know. It's like, yeah, they saw something that I didn't see. But to your earlier point, I think what's so beautiful about, you know, what we just talked about was that, yeah, when you have a third party, when you have support, when you have someone else to kind of be an observer of you looking, you know, they're outside looking in, there is so much gold that you can find but when you're so close to it, and even for me, even as a coach, when I'm dealing with my own stuff, sometimes it's really hard to kind of detach and look at it
Hmm.
objectively, right? And
Yep.
that's why we have healthcare professionals and coaches and people like us who really, you know, have a specific kind of listening and a specific kind of viewpoint and experience in all of this. And so I don't think I would have been able, people go, oh yeah, Janelle, that was like, you know, 1 in a million. Yeah, it is 1 in a million. But the thing is that I actually took responsibility for myself and I go, okay, what am I doing wrong? Where is it that I need to be improved? What am I not? What are the blind spots that I have about myself? Because you're right. You know, I knew that even if I did leave this marriage and I, you know, went on to another relationship, I knew that something was going to happen because the common denominator is me.
Right. Well, and I love I love what you just said about the common denominator being me, but also then if you're doing that, wouldn't you say that the pain and suffering then becomes optional? Because if you're focusing on that, and I say this having done the opposite of what you did. So I didn't do the work. I didn't make the effort. I didn't understand
Mm,
that what part I brought the relational unhealthy relational dynamic, and I just perpetuated it, which then that perpetuates the pain and suffering. If you do what you just described and what we're talking about in trying to identify that, focus on yourself, know what these triggers are, what your emotions mean, all that stuff, then you have the choice of whether that becomes pain and suffering. And
yeah.
I would say that it doesn't, because then you're making a choice to move in a healthier direction. Now, that's not to say that it's not going to be painful having this stuff come up, or
Yeah.
dealing with childhood trauma, or any
Yeah.
trauma, or anything that might, or abuse, or anything else that may have happened in your life. It's just to say that you're making the choice of of what you're going to do with that. And
Yeah.
if you're moving that towards an intention that you want, which might be a healthy relationship or just be healthy or whatever it is, then the pain and suffering becomes optional.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's because we resist what's happening, right? Especially when you're the one who's being divorced, like you had no choice in the matter,
Hmm.
right? It's so easy to go, no, this shouldn't be happening. And we gotta fix it. And a lot of times it's too late. And you
Yeah.
know, the men that I've met that are in that situation where they reach out to me and go, Janelle, help me save my marriage. I'm like, okay, well,
Right.
what's going on? Like, my wife just filed for divorce and she filed a restraining order. And I was like, I don't actually know if I can help you, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that most often happens to the men because the men are the ones that are served 70+% of the time.
yeah.
And yeah, and so that's yeah, it's a big issue because for men that is a a challenge in the sense that no, they obviously, if they're calling you, know that there was something wrong or that they did something wrong in a relationship. They just have not focused on it or haven't been forced to focus on it. Now this is forcing them to focus and do something about it. And it's a wake up call.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes the damage is way too bad to
Yeah.
fix things, but not all the time. If
Yes.
they're and so here's the message I don't want to be getting out there to the women is that file for divorce to make your husband wake up,
Yeah.
and he will wake up, because that's not the way to go about it. And then there
No.
can be damage done in that. But
Yeah.
both parties understand that there's if that is something that you're contemplating, there is an unhealthy relational dynamic that's going on that somebody like Janelle can look at from that third party perspective and say, oh, well, have you considered that? Or maybe try this or do something, because
Mhm.
you might be surprised at how easy it is. And I don't want to say easy, not in the sense that it's easy to change your behaviors and your mindset and the work that you're going to have to do, but easy in identifying what it
Yeah.
is, and then being able to take action steps with a coach. It's kind of like I say this all the time, and I'm not preaching to the choir with you, is we get coaches to help us with athletics, or if we're in a sport to get better at a skill for a sports, and to coach a whole team. We have excuse me, we have coaches for individual positions, and then for the entire offensive line, and then
Yeah.
for the whole team. Like there's coaches down to
Even
every
in
single level. And
Yeah,
this
even
is
in
even in
corporate.
in corporate and in music, right? In
Yeah.
creative, the same, like instruments, and then quiet. Like, so we have that but we don't do that in our personal lives. And it's just crazy when we think about it, because it works really well. You and I know that in doing this every single day. But man, just get somebody and take the time to sit down with somebody else, if you're both willing to save it, and you'll be absolutely amazed. And you know, Janelle, because I refer anybody that has my first question is, do you think that there is an iota of an opportunity at saving this? And if they say yes, I send them to you,
Thank you.
to talk about and try to uncover what it is. Because trust me, going through the divorce and then life post divorce is going to be much more work than trying to unravel maybe something here or there, or an unhealthy relational dynamic that you've developed, that you have a whole life built around with somebody. It's
Mhm.
much easier to do that than go through the divorce. And I say that having done it myself. I say that having seen this every single day with the dads that I work with. So if
Yeah.
there is that iota, call Janelle
Yeah, thank you.
or call
So
me, and then I'll have you call for me.
so I have to say something to you. So you know that person that you referred to me recently.
Mm-hmm.
So Jay,
Mm-hmm.
um, this is what he says to me. He says, "Well, you know, I think divorce is the best choice for us. And I don't think divorce is gonna impact our family. We're gonna work really well together, and there's gonna be no impact on our three girls." And yet
Mm,
they're not speaking to each other, but he just is convinced that that there's no way that this is gonna, because you and I, you know me. I am a huge advocate for children.
yeah.
Huge. I think that sometimes we forget how our own behavior impacts our children, not
Mm-hmm.
only in a direct way as far as like if we're fighting, but even when the energy in the house, the tension, the awkwardness, even that like feelings of alienation when we're now like roommates, where we stop just actually being partners, they can feel that.
Yeah.
And so when I'm listening to him saying, "Oh, this is not going to happen to us. We're not going to be a statistic," it makes my heart sad because I feel
Well,
like he's in denial. And
I
not that this
appreciate
is
his optimism, though.
yeah.
At least that's a better way to go into it in the mindset. But you're exactly right. I was just having this conversation with a client yesterday who's post divorce, and he was talking about how his son emulates. His son is an infant, just walking and talking, but emulates everything that he does because he's learning. That's how he learned,
Yeah.
watching your parents. And I made the point, because I have teens now. I said, and it gets even more, I don't want to say important, but it gets in a different way, it becomes even something that's more ingrained in them, because then they're watching you to model behavior of how they're going to lead their lives as adults. And
Mhm.
I made the point that, to what you said about energy, I said, I know, I have learned, I didn't know, but I have learned that even if I wake up in the morning and my energy is off, the whole household's energy becomes off. And then, like, if stuff becomes key, I got to stop. I got to be like, well, like, how am I showing up here? Because
Yeah.
something's off here. And it doesn't mean every time, I've got teen girls. So there is some responsibility there around teen girls and their drama. But anyway, I've got to pay attention to that,
Yeah.
because it has an impact on them. And so that's why when I'm doing the divorced dad coaching with them, taking care of themselves, and this is a good
Yeah.
message for any mom or dad,
Yeah.
taking care of yourself is the primary thing that you need to do through this process, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Have yourself grounded in a good position. That's hard for us because we think that that's selfish and that we're not putting the kids first. But think of it from their perspective. When they grow up, you're going to want them to do that. So if you're not, all you're doing is modeling a poor behavior. So
Yeah.
taking care of that, and then you've got the energy to deal with whatever it might be, whether it's a toddler and tantrums or it's a teen and drama. Whatever, you've got
Yeah.
the energy and you're in a good place and a foundation to deal with that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
man. You gotta put your oxygen mask on first, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I was there was something you said earlier about the kids.
Well, the impact,
Yeah.
what you said about
Yeah.
the impact on the kids is, it's just, they're going to go through, this is going to have an impact on the kids. And so I guess the point I want to make is, if you can, work on the relationship, you can figure it out, that is going to be the best possible way. There are all kinds of studies and research that shows, if a family stays intact, there's two parents that are there in the house, that is the best possible situation for the
Yeah.
children, because there's so much of particularly intersexual and relational dynamics that go on that they need to learn and understand, that I didn't, because my parents were divorced, how to have a relationship with somebody else. And if you don't have that as a model in the home, then that's something that, if you don't, like, I try really hard with my daughters to talk about that, but I'm only talking about it, right? I'm not with somebody that I can model that or they see every day in an intact,
Mhm.
traditional family. And so,
Mhm.
but here's the flip side to that, because I don't want single parents out there, dads or moms, to feel guilty about this. There are things that they're going to learn through this that they could only learn through going through this difficult and challenging process. So
Yeah.
it's not a lost cause, but if you can, it's the best case scenario to stay in that.
Yeah.
And his pie in the sky, idea about, oh, it's not gonna, it's not, it's gonna be different.
Yeah.
But there are different things that they can learn, and hopefully, if they're both conscientious and aware and pay attention, that they can mitigate some of it. But it's going to create challenges for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the issues that I see is that people just see divorce as an actual, like, it's a real option before even things get to that point. It's kind of this
Mm,
easy back door, and so what I hear a lot of people go is, well, either we stay together and we fight, or we get divorced. And for some strange reason, that's the only two options people can see. Like, really? Have you thought about this other thing called, maybe getting some help?
right.
I just find it
Communication skills.
communicate, yeah, learning how to
Something.
communicate. Yeah, like, it just boggles my mind that people think that those are the only two options there are, and that they would rather go and spend tens of thousands of dollars and spend all these hundreds of hours in court proceedings and throw money at a lawyer than actually do the work and be
Well,
vulnerable. And I
can
get
we
vulnerability is not easy, but man, we're in this culture of just, immediate gratification. I just want the pain to go away. Then actually really going, okay, well, what is it about me that I'm
yeah.
in a situation?
Can we talk about that for a second? Because I think
Yeah.
that's a huge point that you just made about the doing the work and about the communication. And we've normalized divorce as an option. And that's the sad thing about our society, is just become normalized. It's just like, oh, okay. And there are huge impacts. And we're not talking about the impacts. We're not talking about what it's doing to society. We just have normalized it. And we're like, okay, now how do we deal with it? Which is so wrong, but that's a whole nother podcast episode. But what you're talking about with the communication, because if you could, and I know you do this because I've been able to personally do work with you, but if you can hire somebody like a Janelle or a coach to work on that, no matter what else is going on, if you have an effective way that you can communicate what it is. So whether it is an unhealthy relational dynamic, it's going to be tied to something, and you're going to have triggers that come up. If you're doing one of two things, understanding that something's going to come up and being aware of it, and then effectively communicating, there's nothing that you can't get through in this. And so spending the few thousands of dollars to work with a Janelle or a coach in order to learn that skill. And I would say that would be like the one primary skill. That's what they like. Divorce prep should be just all about communication. Just how to communicate, because you're never going to be the same person. You're going to always have triggers and emotions that come up. It happens over time. There's no end, like there's no end zone, right? You're not going to just finally get to maritable or relational bliss, and you've hit the, scored the touchdown,
The
and
top
it's
of the
all
mountain.
like, and that's it. And you're done, right? I've climbed it, and we're just going to like float around in the clouds together forever, right? It's never going to happen. You're going to it's always, because life's going to come up, and you're going to have challenges, you're going to have sickness. If you can learn that communication and how to work through that, then if the triggers come up, or the childhood trauma, or whatever comes up that you got to deal with, you have a way in which to do it. And that is like what you said, that's so huge.
Yeah, it's so true, because I, thinking about my own divorce, I really realized that it was all my stuff that I was dealing. Yeah, he was doing his thing and I was very upset about it, but it was all my triggers being, rattled. And so here's what I would like to say to the people out there that are considering divorce, is that you got to start with us. We got to start with us. If we are not happy with ourselves, we don't love ourselves, we have no self-worth. We have no confidence. There's a lot of us that have, if you can imagine, I have some pretty deep, vulnerable conversations with my clients. And a lot of them are men who have never cried in front of anyone before.
Yep.
And I feel so privileged to be that space, not only for women, but for men too. And when we go to that deep place, we're all the same, Jude. We all want to be loved. We all want to be accepted.
Right.
We all want to belong.
Yeah.
But like deep down inside of us, we are, our egos are fragile. We all have fear. And unless we're willing to love that part of us, to own that part of us, to have compassion for ourselves and what we have done and haven't done in life, to be able to forgive ourselves again for what we have done and what we haven't done. That's where the healing starts. Because so many people say to me, well, Janelle, why can't I forgive my husband? Why can't I let go of this resentment? And my first question is, what is it about you that you haven't forgiven yourself for?
Right.
This is usually where the tears come, because they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
And so I say, how can you be happy in a relationship with someone else when the most important relationship is with yourself and you haven't taken care of that? You haven't loved that person. So therefore, how can you be in love with somebody else? And so that's why the work starts here. And I tell people, listen, I don't know what the future holds, but what my promise is as your coach is we're going to work together so that no matter what happens in your life, kind of what you were saying earlier, right? Even if a tornado comes and tries to rip you out of the ground, you are solid. And my goal is to have you be so emotionally resilient that whatever life throws at you, you have the skill set to be able to deal with that in a really empowering way and spend less time in that dark, icky place and more time up in this high vibe possibility arena, because that's where life really thrives. Is because this is love up here. Right. down here, this is called fear. And this is
Yeah.
where most of us spend our time resisting, avoiding, focusing what we don't want. And yet when I ask people, okay, well, I'm clear that you know what you don't want. You don't want this, you don't want to fight, you don't want to, you don't want to be lonely, you don't, whatever, right? All these things they don't want. But when I say, well, what is it that you do want?
Right.
Nobody can ever answer that question. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, I haven't thought about it. It was like, yeah.
Well,
No
that's
wonder.
right. Well, they're standing in the forest, right? And they can't stand far enough back to see what's behind it. It could be a beautiful sunset or mountains or a waterfall, but you're standing too close, so they don't know that yet. I love what you said about I love what you said about love, because that's the same thing that I'll talk about with clients too, which is you will only be loved to the capacity that you can love yourself.
Absolutely.
So if you love yourself a little bit, that's as much love that anybody's ever going to be able to get into you, right? It's not even give you, because they may have a much higher capacity to give you, but you're only going to be able to accept as
Yeah.
much as you love yourself, right? Yeah, exactly. Because you're blocking, or you're too close to those trees, or whatever. You're not positioned to where you can accept more. And so somebody might have a massive amount of love to be able to give to you, but you just can't accept it because you can't even love yourself that much. And
Yeah.
that's a misconception with men in particular in divorces, is that this is easy for them. I would venture to say it's even harder for
Yeah.
them, because it's devastating. It's devastating on so many different levels for men, because it's difficult to get into that vulnerability, to get into that understanding of self-love. And that's not something that we are taught. It's not
Yeah.
something that we delve into. It's not really something even our mothers have helped us to work through and process. And
Yeah.
so that it becomes very difficult, because then all of what we've designed, and so I'm speaking from experience again, and of all of what we've designed in our life is what we think it was supposed to be like, right? And you mentioned that too, about what you wanted in your marriage. And then when that goes away, we're devastated. And then because we did get served, usually we are like, oh, like I didn't even know this, or I didn't understand this, or didn't. So I guess the second part to what you're saying is also have compassion for the other person all the time, because you have no idea what it is that they are or not going through, or didn't know, or whatever. And that gets back to that communication. If you can get yourself vulnerable enough to say, well, what is it, or how is it, or how can we work through this, or give me your perspective. It might take a lot of work, because
Yeah.
once you, like you said, once you get to a point, they'll break down. And then if you can open that and create a safe place for
Yeah.
that back and forth, then it can be really beautiful, and it can be foundational to building that relationship up in a phenomenal
Yeah.
manner.
Yeah. I love what you said, Jude, because I think, and I don't know if this is where you were going, but I'm guessing this is where you were going, is that divorce doesn't have to be this ugly, let's get them for all they're worth, let's hurt them, let's, punch them, get them where, all the low blows and all these things that we do. And I get it. Like, in that moment, you are so hurt and you want, there's a part of you that's like, I want them to feel what it feels like to be this hurt. So I'm going to do everything I can to hurt them financially, emotionally, right? Psychologically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, but why? Why do we do this? There's this
Yeah.
book. I don't know if you've read this book, Jude. It's a great book. It's called Getting the Love You Want. Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
It's such a great book. The thing I want to share about it is, there's this thing we do where we go, if I'm unhappy with you, I'm going to throw a hissy fit, and I'm gonna be critical. I'm gonna be mean. And maybe if I do that, maybe you'll come back to me. It's this like, when women are unhappy, for example, we'll, say what we say to our partners. The partner feels bad, guilty, shame, whatever it is. And yet we expect that they're going to come back to us more loving. It's just so backwards. Anyway, this book talks about that. And he's like, yeah, why do we do that? I'm like, yeah, why do we do that? And he says, as children, if you think about us children, we're infants, we cry when we're unhappy.
Yeah.
Right? Then all of a sudden, here comes this adult who goes, oh, you're in pain. Let me come and sweep you up and make you feel better.
Right.
And now as adults, we're doing that to our partner. We're going, I'm unhappy, me. And then we say really mean things. And then we expect our partner to be like, oh, okay. But no, as you and I both know, we get the opposite effect. It's
Right.
like, oh, so you're telling me I'm not good enough. So you're making me, you're judging me, you're criticizing me, whatever. And yet we're so like, huh, how did that happen? And so for me, like that's a lot of fun with me, like when I work with my clients, and I'm like, so you got mad at your husband and yet you're wondering why he pulled away,
Right. Right.
but I think it's just teaching people, and this is what I'm so passionate about, just teaching people a different way to think about, because society, our culture, our fear, our ego, social media has kind of taught us a kind of screwed up way of
Yeah.
relating to each other. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like, that's like, yeah, going to war and winning the battle is like the name of the game. Well, I'm going, no, I don't know any marriage where winning the battle did good for anybody. And yeah, maybe you won that fight, but what is the repercussion and the impact of really diminishing your partner, not having them feel heard or honored for their part? And then we
Yeah.
wonder why we're in the society where we all feel like we're so disconnected from each other.
Well, that's a great, yeah, we've got to stop listening to the social cues around this. And I was just reading an article about Tom Brady and Giselle, I'm not sure,
Yeah,
Giselle,
Boomsha.
and
Are they getting
and
divorced? Is that what's going on?
yeah, they're getting divorced.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, that's the takeaway was, well, there's inequality in marriage. It's like, how do you drive that from what's going on? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to be making those comments, and then, then it was championing what she's doing, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you have no freaking idea. And that's completely speculative, and you have no idea. And so I would absolutely agree with, stop listening to all of what this nonsense is, because all it's doing is normalizing it and perpetuating it, and I would say even encouraging it.
Yeah.
And I think on the women, we get this a lot on the female side, which is, yeah, just go or divorce and da da da. And it's like, no, 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 no. That should be like the last resort
Yeah.
of, like, you've done everything possible. And sometimes people think they have, but they
Yeah.
really haven't.
But they
But
haven't.
it like the absolute last straw. And the other thing I wanted to say about what you said was perfect, because that's exactly the example, or a great example of what I was saying and encouraging about the communication, right? If you take that example of what you're talking about, when in getting your needs met, or not getting your needs met, right, as a child. So maybe you were like me, where I didn't, and then getting my needs met meant having to, like, make somebody happy. And then so I was trying to make somebody happy, that got their needs met all the time, and they were always crying. And so that was that unhealthy relational dynamic, because we
Mhm.
find, right, what we're used to and what's comfortable to
Mhm.
us. And so then that becomes the dynamic. But if you are able to take that time and have that communication that we're talking about, then you talking about, like, what your childhood was, and obviously, if you can do that with the person outside of therapy, that's pretty amazing. But typically this is probably going to happen in therapy, or coaching, or whatever environment that's going to help you facilitate that communication, because otherwise it can get like a mess. But that's a perfect example. So then that's an unhealthy dynamic, that then if you communicate, then you have more empathy, like, oh man, Janelle, I didn't know that was what your childhood was like. And I didn't know that's
Mhm.
how you felt, that, I just need something from you, or I need something in our relationship. And this is what I need. And it's what I've been trying to do in order to do that. And when I didn't get it, I pull away, right? That's where that communication comes in. And then you start seeing, oh, well, we have these common values. We want the same thing. We want
Mhm.
happiness, and we want to do this, and we believe the same things, and how to do it. We just haven't figured out how to get there. So that's a great
Yes.
example, right? Of
Yes.
of communicating around it, and not listening to it was inequality of the relationship, and yeah,
Yeah.
he should be doing that more, he should be pulling away. Well, you don't know that. Maybe he should be, because that probably protected him in his childhood, or it probably family protected her in her childhood or whatever abuse or whatever else it was. So
Yeah.
of course they're going to be doing that because that's what helped them survive till now. So
Yeah, yeah. I would even say, I would even go even a bit further and say even family and even our closest friends can sometimes get in the way of us making the right decisions for us, So
oh yeah.
I'm on the opposite side where, I'm Catholic. Divorce is not a thing we do, right? I'm also
Yep.
Filipino, so, two strikes on me. But, had I listened to my family, they would have been like, no, stay there. But that was the moment where I had to be really clear about myself. But, I've been noticing that a lot of people, they make decisions based on what other people say that they should do when that person has no idea what's really going on. And they're only hearing one side of the story, right? They're
Right.
hearing their girlfriend's side and they're like, oh, he's no good. You should divorce him, when they don't really know what's going on. And so I think we need to also be responsible for making those decisions versus worrying so much about what will people think.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
yeah.
What will my friends say? This is what I hear all the time. What will my friends say if I stay in this marriage? They'll think I'm a chump. Well, who cares? If you love your partner, you have children, you have this, you are committed to having a thriving family and you're willing to fight for that, then that's what there is to do. Who freaking cares what anybody else thinks? Even your mom.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Well, this is sounding like an entire episode of infomercial for coaches because we keep saying find a third party, but it's really true because friends and family have a vested interest and their worlds are colored by some like
Yes, their
our
own beliefs and their own
yeah,
experiences.
exactly. And their interactions with you and your wife or your husband. And so it's not an objective way. And as coaches, we have to meet people where they're at and not interject any of our belief systems and what we think. Or I have clients every week that I'm thinking in my mind, I don't think this is a really good idea. And then it turns out to be a really good idea. So that's the cool thing is I'm reminded every week that how I'm seeing it is not, and
Mhm.
that's why you make your own decisions. So if you can start having that mindset in your personal life and not just in session, like I know better what's for me than anybody else does. And my feeling is now that's also not to say that your feelings aren't leading you astray because our feelings happen to protect us. And if we've had abuse or trauma or whatever adaptive behavior from childhood, that's likely, and this is, probably getting way too far into the weeds than we want to today, but that's likely keeping you in a position or a mindset that you're used to because it was helpful before, but it's not helpful for now. So I'm not saying that, trust your gut all the time because oftentimes your gut is telling you the wrong thing, but
Sure.
it's just like, trust if you feel that you need to be doing something or doing the work or staying this in order to make improvements or if you can save it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you a funny question, actually. It just came to me. You said something in the first 2 minutes of this interview that really got me curious. You said that you got divorced, you said 10 years ago?
Yeah, almost 10 years, nine and a
Yeah.
half years.
And it's been kind of ongoing and it's taken another, almost 10 years to complete it and $100,000. I'm just curious, like what 100,000, like on what and why 10 years? I would really love to, educate people who are listening to this that are thinking about divorce, because I think that people don't realize that that's actually a possibility. So can you just maybe share, like, what are some of the things that people have to be realized and some of the, this could happen, just based on your experience personally, as well as what you're hearing from your male clients?
Sure. So my situation is probably abnormal and the circumstances are just such that it's it's contentious and my ex has an unlimited amount of resources. So there is no incentive to ever compromise. And therefore, the only way to resolve things is through attorneys in court. And so that's just what it comes down to, which becomes then expensive.
Wow.
And that's not everybody. Most situations and most people have a finite amount of resources, or at least enough common sense that they don't want to expend all of it. So mine is a little bit different than
Gotcha.
than most, but it can be. And if there is one party that just does not want to, then that's what the situation becomes, is you
Mm,
have a court deciding your life for you and your children. And that is the worst possible way to go about this process, because you're leaving it up to somebody who knows little to nothing about you, the relational dynamic that we were talking about, your children, what their lives are like, what's best for them. And they're simply taking that hour to maybe 2 days, if you're lucky, and if it's a high conflict with a lot of moving parts in it, you may be getting 10 hour, 12 hours in front of a judge, and then there's going to be expert witnesses that are going to tell what they think, and they're going to just make a decision in 12 hours, not knowing anything about you or your family or what's really the best. It's just kind of a guess, is what it is. So if you can figure out how to work through it and make the decisions on your own and move that in the direction that you want, that is the best possible way to do it.
gotcha. And is it gone that long because you have children, or is it because of something else?
Oh yeah, children, absolutely. For me, it's been children, protecting my daughters and making sure that they're in an environment and having a life that is safe and beneficial to them. So yeah, for me, it's just been an investment, which is fine. I can make more money, and I do, and I will. So that's perfectly fine. But and again, this is a minority, but there are men. Unfortunately, a ton of the dads that come to me are in situations like this, where they're being alienated, or they've already been alienated, or the children have, or been taken away, or
Yeah.
there's some other kind of challenge around that, and that's unfortunate. And that happens on both sides. It
Yeah.
happens on both sides. We hear a ton of narcissism being thrown around these days, which is kind of a word a word that I try to avoid, but it happens on both sides. There's not it's not one side or the other that does this with the children. And it's unfortunate, because it comes again from a place of fear, and thinking that that's going to do something that's going to help them deal with whatever it is
Yeah. They
that they're
think it's going to
feeling,
give them closure.
shame or anxiety, whatever it is that they're trying to figure out and sort through. So yeah, it's sad. It's unfortunate,
Yeah.
because all that energy, all those resources could be better put to use with your children and in other ways to help society, etc. But some of us don't have a choice,
Yeah, absolutely.
but you have a choice on how you show up. Right. So you could
Yeah.
be bitter about it and upset about it, or you can take it and make it your life's work and try to help other people with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so my last question is, what advice can you give people that are thinking about divorce? And second part of the question is, like, what are some of those mistakes or potholes or sort of things that you want people to just keep in mind when they are contemplating that?
Yeah, well, I think we covered the best advice, which is do everything you can to figure out how to communicate effectively. So if you're going to focus on something, if there's whatever's going on, if you want to try to save it, figure out how to communicate effectively. Go find somebody, a therapist or a coach, or read nonviolent communication if you want to start there, or whatever other method of communicating with somebody, and start practicing that. And you can start doing it yourself. You don't need buy-in
Mhm.
from somebody, from the other person. You can start doing that yourself, like nonviolent communicate. You can learn to communicate in a way that is healthy. Doesn't mean that the person is going to communicate back to you like that, but you can start, and you'll be surprised. You'd
Yeah,
be surprised in the changes that will happen automatically.
100%.
So yeah, so and you know what I'm talking about. So I would say that is the first thing you can possibly do. And then as far as the challenges, just know that it is going to be challenging. And even what you described is probably what would be the best case scenario in a divorce, is still difficult, right? You talked about your anger and the stuff that came up and disappointment and whatnot. It's still going to be difficult and challenging mentally and emotionally, and even in the best case scenario. So know that it's going to be work. It's going to be
Yeah.
work, and you're going to have to put effort into it. So why not do it now and try to save it if you can? But if
Yeah.
not, then go through it but do everything you can
Yeah.
before pulling the trigger on that. And don't listen to don't listen to all the nonsense out there. Really, seriously, just I know you do free stuff, like free consultation. I do like, just schedule with us and we'll tell you. Don't listen to your girlfriend. Don't listen to, don't listen to some whatever crazy podcast or whatever article that I just read that says there's some inequality in your marriage or other BSs. Call
Yeah.
one of us that talks and sees about it every day, and we'll say, that's not to say that we don't look at some situations and say, okay, well, nothing's impossible, but you've got some challenges on your hands. It depends
Yeah.
on how much effort you want to make. We don't lie to people just to get them to be clients. We're going to be upfront with you, but get some good third party perspective on what it is. And maybe this goes to what we were talking about before. Maybe do that with more than one person.
Yes.
Because
Agreed.
there is a lot of bad coaches. There are a lot of bad coaches. There are a lot of bad therapists. There are a lot of bad plumbers. There's a lot of bad doctors, right? Okay, there's a lot of bad. So getting more than one opinion is incredibly important, because you were talking about your clients that they said, well, there's no hope for you. Well, there's always hope. But, depending, it's a spectrum of what the hope can be. So do that with more people. Call Janelle and then call me. And then Janelle's going to have you talk to me, or call me, and then I'm going to have you talk to Janelle too. So get more than one opinion on what you need to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I agree. I think that, it's not our job to tell people what to do. At least that's how I come about it. But, I'm really clear with my clients. I'm like, listen, my job, what I stand for, what my mission is on this planet is to save marriages. If you're not sure if you should save your marriage, that is not my job. I'm not here to convince you to save your marriage. I am the one that when you say, you know what, I want to save my marriage, I just don't know how, that's where I come in. But I will never tell someone what they should do with their relationship. That's up to them.
Yep.
And if they're not sure, then I'm like, well, then maybe you need to go figure that out. And when you figure it out, then you come talk to me, right? But I think you're right. I think it's talking about different people, feeling people's energy, seeing, where's the match, where the core values, where do they align? Where do they come from? Do they come from a place of, we want to save the marriage? Do they come from just strictly unbiased communication? Like, what is their specialty, if you will? Right. For me, I'm really about being super, super straight with my clients about what I see. I'm all about creating vulnerability and communication, and really ownership. Responsibility is a word that is like, if I could get paid, 10 cents for every time I use the word responsibility, I would be a millionaire. So
another word you don't hear out there in society either. Interesting, huh?
Oh, yeah. And so here's the thing is, when we hear
you're responsible, not somebody else, you're responsible.
Yeah.
And you hear the opposite all the time. Like, oh, it's this or it's that, or you're a victim, and you're not. I don't care. Look, I had significant childhood trauma and abuse. I'm not a victim.
Yeah.
I am not a victim. I have the ability to choose what I want to do with that.
Yeah.
And so that empowers me. I'm not a victim. I can use that for good and for positive. And I do continually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to create a different context for the word responsibility. A lot of people, when they hear the word responsibility, they think blame, they think fault. No, in my world, responsibility is simply the ability to respond. We cannot respond when we're in victim mode, because we think that the problem is out there.
Right.
But when we have the ability to respond, we're taking ownership, going, yeah, you know what? I did that. Yeah, you know what? I upset you. Yeah, you know what? I didn't do that thing you said I was supposed to do.
Yep.
It's not blame. It's not shame. It's not bad. It's not good. It's just ownership.
Right.
Neutral. There's no morality in it. And I think that's what makes the word responsibility feel really uncomfortable, because they think it's a moral thing. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, if I'm being responsible, I'm admitting I'm bad. No. Being
Yeah.
responsible is an empowering context if you create it that way.
Yep. Exactly. Absolutely.
So Jude,
I love it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I love it. No, well, I know. I mean, we interact enough to know we're on the same page all the time. But I think
Yes.
everybody else is probably like, they scripted all this stuff. I'm like, we're
No,
not.
no,
We're
no,
just
no,
on the same
no.
page with stuff. So no,
No.
and so I'll just stay with this,
Yeah.
or I'll just finish with this. Is that it transforms your life. Like, I know some of your story, you know some of my story. It transforms your life when you're able to then do this. It's that what I was talking about later. There might be this Joey Klein, Inner Matrix, uses this example of, there you might be looking for this beauty, this beautiful waterfall, and you're in the forest, but you can hear it, but you can't see it because you're in there. But if you step back, if you change your perspective on your mindset on it, you can look back and you can see it, right? Because you stood back and you see all the forest, and then you see it behind her. Right.
Yeah.
So when you change this mindset and when you change that perspective, it can absolutely expand your life. And you talked about a little bit earlier, whether you're working down here in that fear, or then working up here in this, thriving and creating and just awesome. It's just awesome. And then you're moving your life where you want it to go, as opposed to just reacting to what's happening. It's really pretty awesome.
Yeah. Jude, I always enjoy being with you. You're
Likewise.
so awesome. Your love and your stand for men, and just being that angel for them in their darkest moments, when they feel like life has completely abandoned them, and they don't know what is in front of them, and they're scared. They are so scared. So I really acknowledge you for who you are in the world and the difference that you make. I would love to know, what do you have coming up? What programs you got going on, if anyone's interested in working with you?
Yes. So we just launched yesterday the Divorced Dadvocate membership site. So we have a goal of getting 2,000 men in the community in 6 months.
Beautiful.
And so if you go to the divorcedadvocate.com, you can check that out under membership. And I wanted to offer out to your audience, Janelle, if anybody, I want to give away a free year membership to anybody that will email me at Jude, Jude, at thedivorceddadvocate.com. And so there's 2 D's behind the divorced and dadvocate, thedivorceddadvocate.com, and put in the subject line, Janelle Rocks. Then I will give you a free 1-year membership to the site. And the site is awesome. And the membership is awesome. We've got a mobile app. We've got free workshops, free classes. We're going to have private discussion groups. It's kind of like a social media platform within it for dads to talk about different things, whether it's before, during, or after divorce. And then if you want to do private coaching, there's a discount, 25% discount on private coaching. We're going to have member-only podcasts and experts like you in there, and working with guys. So it's going to be really, really, really amazing. So check that out. That's the most exciting thing that we're working on. We got a lot of other stuff going on, but
it sounds like it.
That'll be awesome.
Like it. Yeah, I love the work that you do, Jude. I love who you are. I love what you stand for. And thank you for taking this time to be with us, to be with my people, and just talk about this topic that I think is really, really important. And, I think you and I both are committed to, transforming the world and thrive in creating thriving family and creating that healing process. So thank you for being with me today.
Amen. My pleasure.
All right. Bye for now. Leave meeting and meeting for all. Leave meeting. No. How do I do this? Okay. I guess I would just hit pause.
Stop recording.